How to stack peptides. One of the challenges that you're going to have when you're using peptides is thinking that all this research on peptides and the mechanism of action is going to help change everything. And then you try the peptide and it didn't work. And you're devastated because you were so excited. So in this video, I'm going to show you why people aren't stacking peptides, and when they do, they're stacking the wrong peptides together. I'm also going to show you why stacking peptides is the most leveraged activity you can do to maximize your improvements from peptides. So let's jump in. So I'm Regan Archibald. I created this patented process called the Peptide Bypass. And what the Peptide Bypass is it's looking at blood labs and analyzing all the biometrics in your body and then utilizing those biometrics to selectively target different genetic pathways that aren't optimized with peptides. And if you do this in the correct way, it's similar to having all cylinders firing together. So if you think of like an 8-cylinder engine, and if you've ever heard like all cylinders aren't firing on the team today, it's because one of those pistons is not getting the spark. And it's no different in peptides. It's like if you're playing in a band and you got your guitarist, you got your drummer, you got the vocalist, you've got the people playing the tambourines or whatever, flute, one of them's off tune, the whole band is not going to sound as good. And that's what happens in our biology. And so when it comes to peptide stacking, and what I mean by peptide stacking is we take these novel peptides, which are just short chains of amino acids. These are proteins that naturally exist in your body. And we run your blood labs, and then we use these peptides to target pathways that aren't optimized. So these peptides could be stacked in a fashion of 3, 4, even 5 peptides. And what we find is that those peptides, when they're stacked, they yield a greater response therapeutically than having a singular peptide go in to try to fix all the damage. This peptide stacking process, it took me about 2 years to figure out what peptides work best together. Now, I was a member of the Peptide Society, the International Peptide Society. I've spoken at many conferences throughout the United States and even internationally on peptide therapy. Even spoken at stem cell conferences on how to use stem cells and peptides to optimize outcomes. But as I was undergoing the process of discovering how to stack peptides, I realized that there was limitations. I use my body as my own laboratory. And so if you ever hear, oh, Regan didn't make it through that experiment, just don't repeat the thing that I had already tried, just forewarning. But what I noticed is when I used BPC 157, I noticed that my recovery time was pretty good as far as like how well I felt. And then I stacked BPC 157 with thymosin beta 4. And all of a sudden, I felt like I wasn't working out hard enough because I didn't have the muscle soreness. Now, if you've ever felt what's called DOMS or delayed onset muscle soreness, you know that the day after you work out, you're like, I feel pretty good. I think I got this. And then, but it's day 2 is when you're just like, whoa, you feel like all the lactic acids just settled in your muscles and it feels like concrete. That's DOMS, that's delayed onset muscle soreness. And when I started using the BPC and thymosin beta 4, all of a sudden I noticed that I didn't have that soreness. And I was heavy into CrossFit at the time. Chris Spieler, who's a legend in the CrossFit world, training with him up in Park City. And I just was so excited because I could go the next day and I could hit my WOD, my workout of the day, and hit PRs and continually improve. And it was a breakthrough. And what also gave me even more leverage is when I added in the growth hormone releasing peptide. So I was using CJC 1295 with ipamorelin. And the reason why you'd want to stack that combination is because if you don't, then you're going to get hungry when you're on these growth hormone releasing peptides. Think about how hungry you were as a teenager. Like you go, your mom made cookies and it's not like you eat one, you eat like the whole batch. In fact, my sister made me cookies one evening and I just moved sprinkler pipes in Idaho and I was tired. The sun was just, I worked sun up to sundown and I came home and I ate the cookie. I ate one cookie. I was going for 2 and my sister's like, just eat one. And I was like, why? And she's like, just trust me, just only eat one. There's other people coming over. And I just took her at face value. And the next day, we're moving pipe again, first thing in the morning, and we all, like my cousin and then another worker, my dad, we all ended up with diarrhea. My sister put the chocolate chips in the cookie, was X-Lax. So, so watch out for that because it's not a great way to heal your body. But the thing that happens, I had high levels of growth hormone. You know, I was working all day and I was running a lot. And so ipamorelin, what it does is ipamorelin works on the other part of the growth hormone cycle, the ghrelin pathway. And what you'll find is you'll get a 7 times increase when you stack CJC 1295 with ipamorelin. You get a 7 times greater pulse of growth hormone, and you won't get the hunger that typically accompanies it. And so it's really, really important that if you are using these peptides, especially the growth hormone peptides, you want to have some recovery, because when your body is going into deep sleep, that's when growth hormone gets released. So the first thing you want to do is go to sleep early. And this is what we call the essentials. So anyone who starts a program with us, the first 60 days is the reset. And there's 6 essentials that you want to follow in the reset as you're stacking the peptides. One of those is you want to get to bed early, ideally by 9:30, wake up at 5:30. And then you want to practice the 30-30 method of exercise. 30 minutes in the morning, get some exercise in. If that's the time where you want to do low intensity, just something that's very non-stressful for your nervous system, just some like neuromuscular activation where you're stretching, moving your body, Pilates, yoga, going outside. Those are really smart things to do in the morning. And then maybe your afternoon is where you go really hard for 30 minutes. But you want to make sure you've got the right cadence of movement, but movement needs to be done at least twice a day intentionally. And these are part of the essentials. The other essential is hydration. And so when you're stacking peptides, if you don't have the right hydration and the right electrolyte mix in your blood, then it's going to prohibit the signaling of the cells. And remember, these peptides are just protein structures that are basically creating a symphony in your body. And so as you're stacking these peptides, the signal is influenced by the charge of the electrolytes in your blood. And so when we run your blood lab, we'll be looking at sodium-potassium ratios, we'll be looking at your chloride markers, your potassium, your magnesium. Those are going to be really important to add the minerals in. And especially if you're losing weight, you want to make sure that you're detoxifying properly. And that's where in this first 60-day reset, we're going to get you sleeping great. We're going to get your metabolism triggered again, get you fired up. We're going to also down-regulate that stress response in your body so that you can relax and digest. And we're not going to do it with X-Lax in your cookies. I can promise you that, or X-Lax in your peptides. But the important thing when stacking peptides is you want to look at the categories of peptides. So number one, there's a category of peptides called nootropics or cognitive enhancing peptides. And I've got a lot of videos on the cognitive enhancing peptides. So we'll provide a link in the show notes below, but go watch those videos on like nootropics, because if you want to have greater levels of focus in the morning, we may get you on a peptide called aniracetam or another one that I love called dihexa. And dihexa has got some of the similar properties to nicotine. And many of you, because it works on that ACE2 pathway, many of you are like, oh, is nicotine safe? Is it not? I've got another video just on that alone. But dihexa is really powerful because it activates BDNF, so it helps your brain heal. It also activates some of the dopamine pathways, so you have that sense of reward and you feel like you're accomplishing things throughout the day. In the afternoon, you can use Selenx. So these are peptide stacks that you want to do where you're using peptides sequentially the right time of day for the right outcome. So if it's cognitive performance, not only are these nootropics like Selenx, C-Max, dihexa, cerebrolysin, these can be used, but you don't want to stack those together at the same time. If you're overlapping them, you're going to be finding that you just don't have the same benefits. So when you cycle it, so one day you would do dihexa in the morning, and then the next day do C-Max in the morning. And then the following day would be a great day to do cerebrolysin. And then the day after that would be a great day to do NuPep, for example. And then in the afternoons, that's a great time where you can use like Selenx. You can activate the GABA pathways just a little easier, or you use PE2228. And so if you have high levels of anxiety, then you'd want to use these a little more sequentially, where you'd use PE2228 and Selenx in conjunction if you have anxiety and depression. If you just have depression, then PE2228 would probably be a little better than Selenx for you. But once again, work with a provider who's trained in peptides, but also someone who understands peptide stacks. The next category that we go to is your muscle building and muscle recovery. So muscle building, there's two things that you look at. You look at mTOR pathway, and then you also look at a pathway called follistatin. When it comes to muscle building, there's three categories, and there's the mTOR and AMPK. So you want to think of your biology as there's always a gas pedal and there's a brake. There's always inputs and there's outputs, and there's always a negative and positive feedback loop in your body so that things stay balanced, because it's the law of entropy. And just like Elon Musk says, anything is questionable unless it's the laws of physics. And so the law of entropy is right there. Like your body's always trying to go to like the lowest amount of resistance possible. And so as we talked about the nootropic peptides, that's where we talk about like GABA, and then we talk dopamine, we talk serotonin, we talk anandamide, because there's always this calibration. And when it comes to muscle building, these three pathways that you want to consider. Number one, that mTOR AMPK. Number two is where you look at myostatin and follistatin. And then number three is where you want to look at the growth hormone pathway. And growth hormone would also capture that with testosterone or the anabolics. And so when you're looking at muscle building, when it comes to mTOR and AMPK, a lot of people are using rapamycin because mTOR is just the mammalian target of rapamycin. And rapamycin had been shown to extend lifespan because you're essentially pressing the immune system just enough to where your body goes into this mTOR inhibition. So rapamycin will turn off that mTOR pathway. mTOR is how you build muscle. So you don't want it to be turned off all the time. And I prefer using peptides that activate the secondary system called AMPK. And so that's how you can use growth hormone peptides, and growth hormone peptides is an mTOR activator, or you can use peptides to stimulate more testosterone, like kispectin, gonadorelin. Those are phenomenal, but then you can also activate the AMPK pathway through 5-amino-1-MQ, MOD-SC, SS31. It's like this whole world just opens up as you start thinking through peptides as stacking them sequentially so that you're not putting yourself at risk. And this is where the protocol or program design, the peptide bypass, has been so exciting, because over the course of thousands of patients going through this, getting their labs ran, and then understanding what your goals are, we can do this in a way that's very safe. And most doctors miss this. Most doctors don't remember all the different pathways that need to be considered. And so the second pathway that we talked about is the myostatin and follistatin. So if you think of follistatin, like if follistatin's expressed, if there's no brakes on follistatin, you would just build like these massive muscles. And there's actually, if you want to look up the cows that are, they have this disorder where they're just continually expressing follistatin, they look huge. But if you have too much muscle and if your body's in continual growth, pretty soon your organs just shut down. I mean, your organs get enlarged, and you see this in anabolic steroids are used, and you get this organ megaly, you get massive organs. But there's a peptide called ACE31, so there's two peptides that are called myostatin inhibitors. So when follistatin's going, myostatin's the brake. So think follistatin's the gas, myostatin's the brake. And so if you inhibit myostatin, that means you turn down that regulation, because as we age, the universe just doesn't seem to care about how we look. And so it just like turns off follistatin. But we can use peptides ACE031. And in one of the studies in ACE031, what they found is these menopausal women had adiposity, so they had sarcopenia, where they're actually gaining more fat and losing muscle. Over using one course of ACE031, they were able to lose 9% of adipose on their thighs, and they were able to gain 5% lean muscle mass. And that's phenomenal. The other myostatin inhibitor is called MOD-SC. So remember, ACE031, MOD-SC, these you'll want to use them in tandem. You'll want to use ACE31 for 60 days and then MOD-SC for 60 days and cycle these if recovery and muscle building is part of your strategy. And the phenomenal thing about MOD-SC is you can measure after people do exercise, and I've got videos on this that you can go back and watch. We'll provide a link in the show notes if you want to go deeper. But after exercise, your MOD-SC expression is going to be about 500% greater. And so when you're using MOD-SC as a peptide, you're actually getting this myostatin inhibition, and you're increasing your follistatin so that you're building muscle and building muscle endurance and muscle health, not just muscle mass. So third one is when you're thinking of growth hormone and the anabolic pathway, AMPK, mTOR, but then you also want to balance the expression of testosterone, which is going to be expressed greater in the morning. So dudes, that's one of the reasons you get a little frisky in the morning and you're just like ready to take on the day and you're focused. It's a good time because your testosterone's activated and your cortisol is high, so you're flushing out all the inflammation. And at night, before you go to bed, make sure you're doing some breathing exercises. You're getting your body relaxed so that you're in this rest and digest and recovery phase, and then you get a greater expression of growth hormone. I can tell you, if you're doom scrolling through social media, or if you're stressed about your finances or relationships or whatever right before bed, you're not going to get the same expression and you won't be as creative the next day. But if you stack the peptides properly, like use a peptide like DSIP so that you sleep at night, deep sleep inducing peptide. Epitalin, don't necessarily want to use these at the same time. You want to use DSIP for about a month, reset the circadian rhythms, and then bring in epitalin, which also works on the pineal gland. But what epitalin does is it's a telomerase enzyme, and so it silences the DNA. It takes stress out of the cardiovascular system. It activates more antioxidant production, so especially glutathione. If you have like methylation issues, epitalin is phenomenal. And so you always want to think, okay, detox, cleanse, remove interferences, build up deficiencies. And by stacking peptides in the right way, you're going to find that it's just such a powerful lever for you to pull where you can gain unreasonable amounts of health in the shortest period of time. And so if you want to go deeper into how to stack peptides and exactly what it looks like, then you'll want to watch this video next, and I'll see you there.